This hour has claimed that 3 suspects identified in Tuesday's attacks on Brussels International Airport were long known to the police. Belgium today remains on high alert, boosting security at its border. But, as RT's discovered, it still appears easy to enter the country without checks. Head to in other news this hour, a former FlyDubai pilot reveals exclusively to us that the crew of the doomed flight that crashed in southern Russia was suffering extreme fatigue, and their claims backed up by current and former staff at that airline. And Russia's foreign ministry today backs RT's petition to probe alleged crimes against Kurdish civilians in Turkey, calling for the UN's High Commission on Human Rights to get involved. My name's Kevin Owen. It's just turned 5 p.m. here in Moscow. Thanks for watching RT International. Big news coming in from Belgium then again today. Belgium's federal prosecutor now has confirmed that one of the key suspects in the Brussels attacks is still on the run. Conflicting earlier reports he'd been captured. Seems he's not been captured. He's on the run. Earlier, local media reported he had been arrested. The main suspect was filmed by security cameras at Brussels International Airport, along with 2 other men who are understood to be the suicide bombers. There were 2 explosions at that airport and another at a metro station, in all killing 31, and it's left hundreds wounded.
After the second explosion, so many people panicked, so many people cried.
When I was outside, I just saw two people with heads like covered, really covered with blood.
We felt a small blast of air, and we heard some thudding in the distance. The metro immediately stopped. The lights turned off, the engine turned off.
You could see smoke coming out of the entrance of the metro station. There was many people who were injured pouring out onto the street.
So, as it stands at the moment, 3 men thus far have been arrested in Germany on suspicion of links to the bombings. Meantime, across in Brussels itself, several suspects have been detained in a series of raids. Let's get the latest and go to the Belgian capital. Polly Boyke is stationed there for us to bring us updates throughout the day. Hi, Polly. First of all, we heard the main man here, the main suspect, had been captured. Then he wasn't. Then we heard again earlier on another airport nearby. There was a bomb alert there in a car. Again, it's been a day of people really on the edge and worried. Where are we as it stands at the moment? Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, and I think all that shows just how on edge people here are feeling. We had reports very recently that there was a security alert at another Brussels airport to the south of the Belgian capital, Charleroi. There was a suspect vehicle there with a mobile phone inside. That's why security there was increased. And earlier this morning, we heard from elsewhere in Europe, in Toulouse in France. The airport there had been evacuated because of a suspicious package, and all this really ties in with what Belgium's prosecutor was saying not long ago. They had said that they carried out raids in the apartment where the attackers yesterday set out from in a Belgian suburb. There they found a laptop belonging to one of the 2 brothers that carried out the attack, and there was a letter there from one of them saying that they knew that the police were closing in on them. The net, so to say, was closing in. They suspected the police were about to find them, and he didn't want to end his days in a jail cell. And I think it highlights the fears here that these attacks might not be over yet, given that the prosecutor has just confirmed that that 3rd suspect is still on the run, and given that there is this sentiment from at least one of the attackers we know that he would have, well, he preferred to carry out a suicide bombing rather than risk being found by the police. Now, the prosecutor also confirmed these two identities of these brothers, Ibrahim and Khalid Bakrawi, Khalid being the one that carried out the bombing in the metro, Ibrahim in the airport, and that third suspect, he hasn't named him, but Belgian media has. They say his identity is Najim Lakrawi. He's the man in that now famous CCTV footage, those pictures of the terrorists walking through the airport before they're thought to have detonated those bombs, wearing the light jacket and the hat. There's a manhunt underway for him. And all three of the suspects, according to reports in the media here, were known to the Belgian authorities. Some of the reports saying that they were already wanted in connection to the attacks that took place in Paris last November. Najim Lakrawi, who is still on the loose, he's thought to be the chief bomb maker for the attacks in Paris and potentially the ones that took place here in Brussels yesterday. His fingerprints were found in an apartment here in Brussels that was raided in connection with the Paris attacks, and he's thought to have travelled through Europe into Hungary last September with the prime suspect in the Paris attacks, who's now behind bars. He was arrested last week, Saleh Abdel Salam. So Najim Lakrawi is now Europe's most wanted man, and the manhunt to try and track him down is very much underway. But I have to say, yeah, it's a jumpy feeling here in the city because no one knows what Najim Lakrawi could do next.
That's the thing, isn't it? Of course, people trying to get about, see people over your shoulder, those you've been talking, going on with their everyday lives. It's looking pretty quiet, has to be said, behind you, outside the European Commission there. Flags at half-mast. A real worry, though, you know, people getting onto the metro, bits of it that are opened, must be, or going to any public space, must be thinking in the back of their head, heck, you know, this cannot happen again. What's being done to, at very, very best, try to stop something like this happening again, as you know it?
Well, there is a visible police presence on the streets here in Brussels, and the metro station, you can just take a look. Oh, no, you can't take a look, but there is a metro station just to the side of me that is still shut. A lot of the transport network is still shut, but people are going about their daily business. Police officers and soldiers from the army checking people's possessions when they do go into any transport that is running already. The airport remains closed. No one knows when it will reopen, that main Brussels airport where the attacks hit. We were concerned when we were making our way to Belgium yesterday by reports that the borders may have been sealed off to try and prevent anybody moving from France into Belgium. But, however, we had a pretty easy ride. We made it from a pretty major motorway that runs from France into Belgium without any security checks whatsoever. And I believe you're going to see that footage now on your screen of the moments when we crossed from France into Belgium. We are 800 metres away from the Belgian border. We are trying to establish whether there are being any checks or extra controls carried out, but at the moment it's an empty road. There it is, the sign. We've crossed into Belgium absolutely with no problem whatsoever. Whatever talk there was of extra security or Belgium being on lockdown, at the moment, at least here, it feels pretty free and pretty lax.
There's been an outpouring of support online for the people of Brussels. At the same time, the hashtag #StopIslam began trending on Twitter after the attacks, although a lot of people also used it to denounce anti-Muslim sentiments. RT's Issa Ali reports next from a predominantly immigrant neighbourhood in the Belgian capital.
This is the neighbourhood of Molenbeek in Brussels. It's of course built up somewhat of a notorious reputation over the last few months. It's where the remaining Paris attacker was found just a few days ago and arrested, and of course hundreds of young men have travelled from this neighbourhood to Syria to join up with ISIL. Islamophobia has been on the rise, not just since this attack, but in recent years. It's a combination of the fact that groups like ISIL launch their attacks in the name of Islam. And we're going to try to have a little walk around and talk to some of the locals to get a feeling of how they feel, not just about the attacks, but the coming environment that will follow what happened. Hi sir, can I ask you a quick question?
Excuse me, pas speak French.
بس فرنسي عربي شوية؟
عربي شوية.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Sorry. واحد زي Excuse me, can I ask you a quick question? As you can see, there are people here, most people who are very suspicious of the media, and not many people willing to talk to us today. So many people here avoiding us, but also some people who did talk to us told us that they were worried that issues such as poor integration were the reasons why radicalization has grown amongst some communities in Europe.
This is not good news for us. I live 25 years here, and it never happened like this. So bad. And Pakistani people fear so much like this. Afraid.
After Madrid, after London, after Paris, it was kind of inevitable that the capital of Europe, so to speak, would get its fair share.
Isa Ali Arti in Molenbeek in Brussels.
With me now is Alain Corvez. He's a former advisor for France's Defence and Interior Ministries. Mr. Corvez, thanks for being live on RT International, making the time for us today. The suspects in the airport bombing are reportedly being linked to the Paris attackers, coming a couple of days, of course, after the main suspect there was brought into custody. What's the likelihood that this is a single terror cell at work here in Brussels? Or is it just a number of cells, or was it some sort of revenge for the Paris attacker being taken into custody? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I have no specific information, and you seem to have more information than me. But as far as I understand what happened, it seems that this is a coordinated action between the airport and the underground metro of Brussels. And yes, it seems that there is a link with the Paris attacks. And I think this coordination is a veritable threat for all the European countries, and especially Belgium, because as you know, Brussels is the capital of United Europe, European Union, and as you know, European Union, the Parliament has has voted to make an embargo on Saudi Arabia for the arms. Then it could be also linked to that, but I have no information, specific information about that. But I think there is a lack of a failure of the intelligence, both in France and in Belgium. For the moment,
could these tragic events have been foreseen? As you rightly say, Brussels, the very heart of Europe. And where did it happen? It happened at an airport. It happened in a metro station. Soft targets, but some would say obvious targets. Couldn't the security have seen this coming?
I think the security could have informations about this terrorist network. But you remember the previous attacks in Paris. We discovered afterwards that some of the people involved in these attacks were known from the security services. Then it seems that there is a lack of not of information, but of political action.
And resources? Do you think there's a lack of resources? Other security? You must have some insight here. Are they properly resourced enough in Brussels, the security services?
I think the security services in Brussels have been also have made mistakes, because I don't know if they had information about that, but all the services, the European services, Belgium one and French one, knew that there could be other attacks. And then I think we had to be more cautious and more active about the following and the checking of all these people. I think there is a lack of action, not a lack of information, because I think they had informations, but the way to interpret and to analyze these informations maybe was not fair enough.
Understood. Alan Kovets, former advisor for France's Defence and Interior Ministries, thank you for coming on the programme today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us too. This is RT International from Moscow with me, Kevin Owen. Much more of the world's main news stories right after this break when we come back.
Looks like Aleppo, it looks like Syria here, but we're in Turkey. It's mad to think this is happening.
Uncovering hidden stories, moving against the mainstream, going to all lengths to bring real news to Britain. I'm Afshan Ratansi, going underground to bring you the stories that really matter, only on RT.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Arabic? It's all here on RT. Reporting from the world's hotspots, VIP interviews, intriguing stories. Are you here? Then try RT Arabic. To find out more, visit arabic.rt.com.
Developing story to alert you to next. There are new revelations following the FlyDubai passenger plane crash in Rostov-on-Don in Russia on Saturday that killed all 62 on board. Now it's been claimed the airline's pilots are being forced to the brink of exhaustion, and it seems they'd warned it could lead to tragedy. Well, the allegations were made to RT by a former FlyDubai pilot who's asked to remain anonymous.
When I was still at the company, it was one of the last things that I told management was that there would be an accident, and it would be because of pilot fatigue. The way that they build the schedules, they do not allow pilots to get the right amount of rest or the proper rest before a flight, and that is exactly what both of these pilots were, the situation that they were in, for sure. I think that there was a survey done at some point, and the company was very mad when the survey got out because they were not the ones that set it up. But one of the questions was, do you think there's going to be a crash? And over 80% of the pilots that participated, which one was me, we said yes. There will be a crash at FlyDubai. And it's unbelievable. I mean, they knew this was coming. They absolutely knew it. I wish it didn't happen. I wish it wasn't true. I personally lost friends who were crew on that airplane, but I wasn't surprised. If there's any airline in the world that has everything set up for a crash as this one, it's FlyDubai.
Well, that was a former FlyDubai pilot speaking exclusively to RT's Paula Sleer. She's in Dubai.
After the plane crashed on Saturday morning, I reached out to the crew, the pilots. of FlyDubai, I saw that many of them were posting messages of condolences and support online, and I was asking whether anyone wanted to talk to us. They were all afraid to talk to the media because they felt that there could be repercussions. But word got out that I was looking, and I was contacted by a former captain of the airline who is based in Doha. He told me that he had some important information to give me and he wanted to meet with me. When I met him, he was visibly shaken. He hasn't eaten properly or slept properly since the crash on Saturday morning, and he said he was motivated to talk to RT because he knew many of those on board and he felt that the truth needed to get out. As he put it, passengers buy a ticket, they put their life in the hands of the pilots and the crew, and they have a right, we have a right to know what is happening. He holds the management of FlyDubai 100% responsible for the crash. He backed up his claims with data, including the flying schedule of the first officer. Take a look.
Neither pilot had much seniority in their seats. They were considered pretty junior. Therefore, they would have been getting pretty bad flights, long night flights, a lot of night flights. And they were probably very, very tired and very fatigued. I've been able to get the first officer's roster, and he was working 11 days in a row with the exception of one day off, which was Tuesday, March 15th. Everybody at the company has these dangerous shifts from day flight to night flight, and then back to a day flight, and then back to a night flight. And it has definitely been, you know, a big issue for a long time. I know that when I was still at FlyDubai, there were meetings every 2 weeks with the chief pilot. And from what I understand, in most of those meetings, this was always brought up. And in fact, one of the meetings, the chief pilot referred to us as a bunch of prima donnas, like we complain too much. That's exactly what he said. He said, you guys are just a bunch of prima donnas.
The question of how legal are these rostering systems is exactly the question I put to this former captain. And he answered the question by saying that it is legal, but there are many things out there in the world that are legal, but are simply wrong. He said that the captain of this flight, who had already resigned and was actually on one of his last flights, one of the main reasons, if not the main reason he had resigned, was because of his flying schedule. He simply just could not keep up with it anymore. Every month, this is common practice across the airline industry, pilots need to fill in an air safety report. We have more data. We have many of those ASRs that were filled in at FlyDubai. And if you look at them, you can see just how often pilots were filling in the words fatigue.
With such a high workload and jumps between days and nights, I quite simply cannot work anymore without becoming a safety risk.
I am constantly tired because of the many day-to-night body clock changes. I have no problem doing night or early morning flights. All I ask for is that there is a pattern in the roster.
It is increasingly impossible to operate safely in a habitually body clock changing roster with minimum days off to recuperate. Flight safety is being compromised by a roster which allows no proper periods of stability or recuperation.
I've been filing reports like this for a year, as of many others. It is cynical of the company in the extreme that in this period the situation has been allowed to get worse and not better.
We sent all the information given to us by the former FlyDubai pilot then to Russia's Interstate Aviation Committee. They replied saying its experts will closely examine the claims, but they won't comment further until the flight data has been thoroughly investigated from both flight recorders. Meantime, we also asked FlyDubai to comment on the revelations by its former pilot. They got back to us. They said the safety of their flight and cabin crews is of primary importance, and that if a member of the crew does feel that he or she hasn't been able to have enough rest, then they encourage pilots to declare themselves unfit to fly. Meantime, we asked a number of international organisations for their comment, including the Independent Pilots Association. Only two replied thus far. They both refused to provide any information regarding claims of worker exhaustion. And That, you know, another FlyDubai pilot contacted us following the report too, confirming the revelations aired by us. He also shared some insight into the crew of that doomed flight.
All these comments are extremely accurate and true. The pressure applied to pilots, flight and management is relentless. They were definitely fatigued. They're still the first officer's roster. I know for a fact, speaking to a close friend of his wife, she said that Alejandro didn't want to go into work that night because he was so tired. But he said, I need to go into work because we're having twins, we're going to need the money. And because if you don't go into work, about a third of our pay is made up of flying pay. So if you don't fly, you don't get paid. So many pilots have fallen asleep at the controls, but for fear of reprisal, they don't necessarily file a safety report. They say it's a non-punitive culture at FlyDubai. If you report it, nothing will happen. But pilots that have spoken out have been lent on to resign and told that they'll give them the end of service benefit if they resign. Otherwise, they'll be fired.
And there's more. That pilot wasn't the only one to get in touch following RT's exclusive interview. Here's some more of the comments we received.
I can tell you right now that the aviation community around the world has full respect for Russia today. And I will always be thankful for this, as will the families of the victims.
I'm also a former pilot of FlyDubai. I just wanted to commend you and thank you for your whistleblowing piece on another FlyDubai pilot. His statements are, I am sad to say, wholly accurate.
We wanted to get some more professional thoughts, so we showed the documents outlining the pilot's grueling schedule to an aviation consultant to get some thoughts, who in turn accused the airline of exploiting its employees.
The people doing the rostering are not paying attention to the well-being of the aircrew, and therefore you keep running into chronic fatigue where they don't get enough rest. Your behaviour can become more erratic. You don't think clearly, you don't monitor instruments carefully, and you can miss many things. The papers that you sent me, where one of the pilots has been reporting that he cannot cope because he's not had enough time off to readjust, is typical of ones we've seen in the past. They are quite frankly exploiting or making their pilots fly much longer than many other airlines who have proper fatigue management systems in place. This needs far more investigation because it might be implicated in the accident itself.
Now, an update on the petition launched by RT International to get the UN to look at Kurdish allegations of atrocities committed by the Turkish military. We can tell you it's now got today the backing of Russia's foreign ministry, which is asking the UN Human Rights Commission to get involved. William Whiteman reported for us on Turkey's crackdown on Kurdish militants in the southeast. You came about some harrowing pictures just about a fortnight ago, and horrendous stories. That one in particular, with the accusations those people burned to death in the cellar. Seems that Russia's top diplomats are on board now with this petition. Take us through what's happened.
Well, yeah, today during a press conference, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, came out and announced that he had actually taken our reports to the UN High Commission for Human Rights. We can have a listen to what he said now.
We have expressed our strongest concerns over the facts your channel, RT, has presented. You reached out to NGOs, and we also called the attention of the UN High Commission for Human Rights to your report. But unfortunately, there's been no coherent response from this major institution.
So, you know, and as he says at the end there, the NGOs, the human rights organisations that we contacted, were slow to respond to start off with, although we have been hearing a little bit more recently from them.
I mean, judging by this petition, it's only been going for just about a week now, hasn't it? There's been a huge strength of public feeling. There are 10,000 people or more that have already signed up to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Around 10,000 people have signed it already. Actually, it's starting to work now because we're starting to hear back from human rights organisations. We can have a look at some of the responses now.
It's really very difficult to understand why the Turkish authorities doesn't give the residential population a chance each day to access food, to access essential services. And it's really the situation which we think resembles collective punishment.
We have received no response from the Turkish government, other than the standard statements about the moderate use of force. This answer is not good enough. It is diplomatic speak and means nothing.
It's necessary to call for the Turkish government and Kurdish forces to respect the Geneva Convention, so that the government won't be able to continue using the excuse of fighting terrorism.
So yeah, it's obviously having an effect. We're getting there, but the whole goal of the petition is to pressure the UN Human Rights Council into actually investigating the claims which are raised in the documentary. So people need to keep on signing the petition and making it public, getting it out there on social media and using the hashtag Justice for Kurds. And let's see what we can do.
William Whiteman, we'll keep following the story. Thank you for coming and tell us a bit more about how that petition's going.
Thank you.
This is RT International. I'll be back. I'm Kevin Owen. I'll be back again in just over half an hour with more of the latest developments from Brussels. But between now and then, Going Underground has got more reaction in a moment and also discusses the suffering of Kurdish civilians in Turkey too. It's coming up.